And then from there, it can recognize that different people are saying the same thing in different ways. So the way, a non-physician talks about an earache is very different from the way a physician might talk about an earache and describe the earache.
Welcome, everyone, to the Office Practicum PediaTricks Podcast. That's Pediatrics with a K. I'm Sean Rossler, Senior Instructional Designer here on OP's Instructional Design Team and the host of the PediaTricks Podcast. And our mission on the show is to make your lives easier. No, we won't be able to help you make sure all the kids are getting to all the camps and activities this summer, but we do hope that you will leave this podcast learning something new. Artificial intelligence, AI, you hear it all the time, quite literally, almost in every space now, don't you? Whether it's writing copy, coming up with notes from a meeting, or generating a really cool image of a possum on a treadmill. True story, I just did that not too long ago. The possibilities for this emerging technology truly seem limitless, and to that point, it seemed only logical that healthcare take hold of this new and exciting frontier and leverage it on one of the more, perhaps, tedious parts of care, composing a note. Well, here at OP, we're excited to look to the future with our new OP AI platform and all it entails. And as usual, I don't know all of what that means, but I brought someone along who certainly does. Joining us on today's podcast is Mark Richards, Chief Revenue Officer here at OP, to talk about OP AI and the practice-changing potential it holds. Just what is OP AI? Why should your practice leverage this new and exciting technology? And how does using OP AI help not only your care improve, but its ability to produce a pediatric note? Let's find out. Mark, welcome to the show, sir.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to being here.
Absolutely. As it is your first time, and it's hard to believe, we've worked together for a while, but it's your first time here in the hot seat. So let's jump right into the basics, the H&P of the interview, if you will. Tell everyone just a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and what it is you do.
I'm happy to. I have managed to avoid your podcast for 3.5 years, so I guess it was about time that I had to come on board.
Absolutely.
Again, thanks for having me. As I said, I started in October of 2021, so I'm right at my 3.5 year mark. Actually, was born on the West Coast, but grew up in Delaware and went to school in Maryland. I had aspirations of being a professional baseball player when I went there, and unfortunately some shoulder trouble sidelined me, but I did stay in school. I got my degree, and now I live in a suburb of Baltimore, so I've stuck around all these years afterwards. So I'm right there in the middle of Maryland. I've been in healthcare IT my whole career, including revenue cycle management and some of the other areas. I did a little bit of work also with remote patient monitoring, RPM, and some neurodiagnostic work with EEG and sleep testing with some of that equipment and software. But it's mostly been the EHR practice management kinds of space, and most of it, probably 75-80%, has been in the independent ambulatory aspects of care, which of course aligns directly with our pediatric customers. It's that independent providers trying to stay successful and stay in business. I kind of fell into healthcare IT while pitching a different internship in college to a Fortune 100 company, and the supervisor I went to at my college job was leaving that role for a vice presidential position at a healthcare software company, and they told me right on the spot they'd give me the internship as long as I could get it approved by the school, and the cherry on the cake, or the cherry on the topping, was they'll pay me if I did it. So as a college kid trying to pay my way through school, as you can imagine, it took me about half a second to say yes to that one.
Absolutely.
And so I did that, and I got into healthcare IT, and I never left. Mm-hmm. Throughout my career, I've actually owned my own business for 11 years. I've worked for what was then a Fortune 15 company, one of the biggest companies in the world, called McKesson, which many of our listeners, I'm sure, have heard of. Mm-hmm. I've also worked for various sizes in between, from small to startups to larger ones. But I find myself in the Goldilocks area, where not too big, not too small, and OP fits right dead center in the middle of that. That's so, right. OP's a great place. Probably most unique in my background is that I didn't come up through the traditional sales and marketing roles that a CRO would necessarily find themselves in. I actually started out building and installing computers, actually doing training of software to people that were newly implementing it. Got into software support from that. I ran a support team for a while. With my knowledge of the software and the roles of the people that we were talking to, I started helping out with some of the demonstrations, a subject matter expert, you might say, and everybody from the front desk people up to the doctors. I kind of knew what they were doing from all the training and support, so it was easy to identify with them. I started getting into more sales and sales management and refined my skills in those areas, and the rest is history. I found my way to OP in a chief revenue officer role. Certainly you did, and you really have truly run the gamut. I didn't even know that about the training software. We'll have to talk about instructional design sometime, but perhaps more pertinent on the topic front than just training software is, as we mentioned, Opie AI. I mean, Opie AI, really AI scribes in general. I'm sure most have at least maybe heard about them or what a scribe can do. But, in the training realm, we never want to assume. So let's walk it back. For those catching up, what is a scribe and how does it work? Great question. Scribe is in, as you noted, it's dominating the airwaves of everything these days, talking about AI and what it's able to do. If you kind of think about the evolution, though, of scribes, it goes back thousands of years, literally, when the scribes were helping the Egyptians and others, keep track of everything, write everything down, and then make copies of things, because that was the only way to get it done. Absolutely. And then the first automation was really the printing press that did away with the scribes having to do the same thing 1,000 times to be able to share it. And that was, 1400s, 1500s. I don't know my history exactly, but you fast forward to the late 1800s and 1900s, and then we started to see the coming of sound recording and being able to record the sound and play it back. And then medical dictation came along as hospitals got more prevalent and documentation became a more important thing. The dictation and the transcribing of that was the early kind of what we would think of as some of the transcription things. And then, of course, computing power kicks in and it starts to be able to do some of the voice recognition. And that's been around 50, 70 so years. And it's really gotten a lot better. The early stuff could recognize a few words, but didn't really do a great job. And then in the 80s and 90s, it started to get a little bit better. But now it does a really great job. And with all of the computing power that's available with AI, it allows AI to actually get in there and really truly understand what's going on. So the quality of the voice recognition combined with that enormous computing power, it allows the system to learn in a lot of different ways, as well as enabling the breakthroughs that we've seen in automating not just a single voice, which was the traditional dictation transcription, but multiple voices. So in a visit, it can actually tell who's the patient or the parent and who's the physician. And then from there, it can recognize that different people are saying the same thing in different ways. So the way a non-physician talks about an earache is very different from the way a physician might talk about an earache and describe the earache. And so it recognizes that those are all really talking about the exact same thing. And then it synthesizes it all together into a really well-documented and complete note, much better than what most people are able to get just, doing it on a traditional documenting system. And best of all, it allows the provider to really stay more focused on the patient, spend less time on all the admin things that they always complain about having to do in this day and age. And they still get the same or much better documentation that's required for everything they need, from being able to bill and justify what they're billing for, and just the reference notes to be able to look back to later. Definitely. I mean, definitely. And, you mentioned the historical angle, and I myself, having worked in the EHR space, for going on 20 years now, there are certain flashbacks I have to things like Dragon, Naturally Speaking, and the dictation phones with the switch on the back. So I remember those times, and I look at this current landscape and just stand in awe. It's so cool to be in technology, but still be amazed, by what it can do. And so looking at scribes in general, we've kind of laid the landscape. But now to take it a step further, perhaps more of a focus on what we're doing here at Opie AI. What is it, Mark, that Opie AI is doing,
differently. I know it's referred to as closed. What does that mean? So what makes Opie AI kind of rise to the top here?
Yeah, well, there's a few different pieces of that, and so when people talk about the quality or the purity of things, it comes down to making sure that what goes in comes out, but you don't put more in than out. And so you've heard the saying, "There's a fly in the ointment," and so the good stuff is the ointment, and the bad stuff, so to speak, is the fly that you don't want in there. And so LLMs have the ability, large language models, I know that gets thrown around a lot. People don't always know what it means, but large language models is the learning that starts to happen. And so with a generic AI solution, it's taking everything and anything. So you think of a ChatGPT or OpenAI or some of the other ones that get thrown around on TV and the news all the time. They're gobbling up every piece of information they can find, and they're adding it to that. And so it's taking the good and the bad, and it's putting it all together. What we're talking about is a closed model that's specific to pediatrics, specific to OP pediatrics, with the vast database that we have. And it's not to say that there's anything wrong with adult medicine by any means, but pediatrics is just a very, very different world. It's not treating small adults. It's, really kids are very, very different in what they go through and what their needs are. So a generic AI solution is going to give you back a very verbatim scribed kind of a note, but it's not really going to give you the accuracy and the interpretation and the maximum benefit that something tailored for pediatrics is going to give you. And for example, a high fever in a child for several days, a newborn in particular, is very, very different than a high fever in an adult that they've had for 3 or 4 days. And so it's a very different kind of interpretation of what might look like the same types of clinical data. And that's just one example. There are numerous across the spectrum of what might be needed for pediatrics. But the learning and the interpretation with adults leads to really mediocre results and even missed opportunities to identify the right problem, an uncommon problem that may get overlooked. And it's not really delivering the excellence that we're looking for in pediatrics. Mm-hmm. Just the early learning that's already taken place with Opie and going on today and will continue to go on throughout the year and really forever as we continue to add things to it, and it learns the nuances of how pediatric medicine is evolving. It will continue to make OP really the AI solution for pediatrics. We have no doubt about that, and we're excited for what the future's going to bring. It's not just learning through repetition. We're actually sending OP back to school, or to school, you might say, by giving it the exact kinds of learning materials and guidelines that it needs that are pediatric specific, pediatric focused, including Bright Futures and AAP clinical practice guidelines and so on. So it's really exciting to be able to guide it and inform it so that it's able to really understand what it needs to and have the right reference points so that ongoing learning is even better.
100%.
You asked about being closed. I'm sorry. You asked about being closed, and closed really means that we have more control over the good learning, which is the pediatric learning, and we avoid some of the, I'll call it bad, but I don't mean that in a bad way, but the non-pediatric learning. In effect, we're limiting the exposure to all of those other things that aren't pediatric specific, so we can mitigate the dilution of the pediatric focus. If you can imagine a million things go into a learning model, if 100,000 of them are pediatric, but 900,000 of them are not pediatric, it's obviously going to get biased in a non-pediatric way. And so we're limiting it to only seeing and hearing and interpreting specific pediatric kinds of things. So, basically a mousetrap with more information isn't always the best mousetrap. So sometimes you just want to limit what goes in there. It also means that the results of the work and the integration and the ongoing enhancements will remain exclusive to OP's customers and the OP community, which of course is the biggest pediatric community, at least in the independent ambulatory space. It's the biggest community that's out there. And last but not least, speaking about the integration opportunities, OP will be the only AI solution that's uniquely integrated into the OP EHR, and that's going to give by any measure the maximum pediatric centric experience and efficient workflows that everybody is looking for to truly spend more time with their patients and get back to doing what they love.
Absolutely. And it really is amazing having come from a health system where everything, ambulatory, inpatient, emergency department, surgery, and everything like that. I thought I had seen it all, but the focus that is required, which I stand in awe of, both as a parent and just as an employee at OP, the laser focus to pediatrics is just massive. And to see a tool embrace that is beyond impressive. So, we see Opie AI is going to do that. Practices just finding out about Opie AI might have questions or reservations about using it. I think that's reasonable. Is it secure? Is it PED specific? I think we just answered the PED specific part. But Mark, why should practices feel confident in their decision to leverage Opie AI?
Yeah, no, another great question, and you're right. It's normal and natural to be a little bit, discerning about using it and what's really behind the scenes there. And so, it's Opie is a very, very secure solution. It has all of the security and compliance protections you'd expect in technology, but beyond that, all of the things that you would expect for healthcare. Preserving patient information and protecting all of that. The data that goes into OP is actually only stored there recognizably for 21 days. At that point, it's completely de-identified. The audio recording is completely deleted and removed. And at that point, effectively, the source of truth is what has been put into the EHR. So it becomes irrelevant at that point because it's all been moved into the OP EHR. So you don't have to worry about what's left online within OP. As we've been discussing, it is and will continue to be very pediatric centric. So all of the things we've already talked about. When you combine the pediatric focus for teaching and learning and training and the pediatric guidelines, the closed model approach minimizes all the noise. In addition to providing the formatting and the workflows within OP to make it pediatric friendly to the provider, and the efficiencies that we're able to get from that the providers are able to get from that, dumping it into the chart and putting it where it belongs as discrete data, both now and in the future. There's not going to be anything else like it on the market that will even come close. It's and the cool thing is we're talking about all this on a scribing level, but it's really just the beginning. We've got a lot of other things that we have planned for it to take scribing to the next level, but also to even do more within the product itself.
Just amazing. I mean, just amazing. The depth, and again, anytime technology emerges, like there's this moment of, okay, it can't possibly do more. It can't possibly do more. But I really do feel like we're just finding out right now all that it can do. And it's just, really, even for me, an exciting time to be a part of the picture. So let's look to that future, Mark. OBAI is good now. But what does that future hold? How does it evolve? How will it learn through usage? And for the practices that use it, what is it they can expect to see in their care landscape as far as like a return, figuratively speaking?
Yeah, well, that's a lot to unpack for sure. But,
sorry about that.
No, that's okay. It's all good. So as a recap, there's the core OP, the product, which is being taught and it's training and it's learning from OP, the company, and OP, the community, as well as the ongoing feedback from the users that are starting to use it now and will continue to use it. And they're actually able to score every note that they create using OP, and they can say how well they think it did in scoring it, and they can provide specific feedback as to what they think did particularly well, or if there's areas that they think continue to need improvement and refinement. So that's an ongoing iterative thing that's out of the box, that's there and ready to go. So that's awesome, and we're looking at that as one of the many ways to continue to iterate this and make it even better. It will also learn each individual style. So each provider will get this already pediatric-centric, pediatric-focused solution. And again, it will get better over time. But when they get it initially, it will be wonderful and pediatric-specific, but it will then immediately start to learn their unique styles and their phraseology and even some what people call dot codes and these phrases that they can use to expand out and not even have to talk quite so much to get the same end results. So every provider instance will actually become its own unique adapted version just to them, and they'll quickly be able to see how that evolves with them. And in a matter of a couple of weeks, depending on how many visits they're seeing in a given week, it may take 3 or 4 weeks if they're not seeing quite as many, but it will start to learn that very quickly and evolve over time and really become even more unique. So it will be pediatric unique and also Dr. Sean unique all at the same time. And then you've got the expanded features that we're looking forward to being able to roll out, which will include, the integration obviously into the Opie EHR. Mm-hmm. Looking at patient history, being able to pull some of the recent patient history to help interpret what's going on in a given visit. That will provide a lot of learning capabilities and a lot of interpretation capabilities that will just further help the provider in getting to the end result diagnosis. And ultimately, it may even be able to say, hey, have you considered this or that? So, if in the course of treating the patient, there's something that maybe is a very, very rare situation that the AI says maybe this applies, maybe it doesn't, but it'll be able to help prompt the providers in certain cases down the road to make sure they don't miss some of those things. And so, beyond that will be actually in expanded features for providers and staff for workflows. And what we're investigating is how we're going to be able to potentially make it available to do things like process orders, create orders, or at least start orders for you. So there's certain things where you may have to sign off on things. E-prescribing, you have to sign off for controlled substances. But the ability to start to automate some of the workflows and the tasking that are outside of the specific visit node itself are kind of the next phase into the future once we get the integration done and more of the pediatric specific learning. So we're extremely excited about where it is today, but where it's going and where we think we can be, 6, 12, 18 months from now. We just see nothing but a very, very bright future for Opie.
Absolutely. I mean, simply incredible. If you think it's good now, folks, stay tuned. It's only going to get better. And Mark, I can't thank you enough. This is such a great insight into what, I don't think it's overspeaking to say potentially the future of medical documentation. So, Mark, thank you so much for being with us here on the show today. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.
All right. And we hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Office Practicum Pediatrics Podcast, or OP3. Be sure to watch for updates and other announcements via both our OP community listserv as well as our social media outlets. And if you have an idea for a guest or would like to be a guest yourself, reach out to the show. We'd love to hear from you. Be well, stay safe, and remember, we can always learn new tricks.